In 1992, the Simpson family were a small close-knit family living in the Australian town of Bargo, New South Wales. It consisted of Christine and Peter and their 3 children, 2 sons and a much-anticipated daughter who was the light of all of their lives, 9-year-old Ebony Jane Simpson. Peter and Christine had moved to Bargo many years earlier before having children, as this seemed like an ideal place to raise them. They bought an old farmhouse and fixed it up, turning it into a home. The couple's 2 sons, Zachary and Tasman, had come along soon after, but when Ebony had been born in 1983, they knew that their little family was now complete. Ebony and her mother were very close. Her mother said that she couldn't believe how perfect Ebony was, with her blonde hair, blue eyes and kind heart. She claimed that Ebony was very special. Life in Bargo was slow-paced. The days on the Simpson farm were long and happy. That was until everything changed one afternoon, on August the 19th of 1992. The day before, Ebony had had a talk at school about stranger danger. This had frightened her because she went home that night and told her mother all about it. Christine had sat up speaking with Ebony for a little while, before reading her a book and tucking her into bed unknowingly for the last time. As part of their daily routine the next morning, Christine dropped Ebony off at the bus stop to get the bus to school. The bus stop was located just 1 kilometre away from their home. After Ebony boarded the bus, Christine set off for work. Every day after school, Christine would finish work just in time to meet Ebony at the bus stop to walk her home again. This day, however, their routine was broken as Christine and Peter had been busy purchasing insurance, and Christine was late to the bus stop. Instead, Christine asked one of her sons, Ebony's older brother Zachary, to wait at the bus stop and pick up his little sister. His bus would usually arrive around the same time as Ebony's. However, in a strange twist of fate that afternoon, his bus was late, and when he eventually arrived a few minutes later, Ebony was not there. Zachary waited for her for a few minutes just in case her bus was also late, but assuming that she had already set off on the 1 kilometre walk back to their farm, he began to walk home alone. Once he arrived home, Ebony was not there. A few minutes later, Christine also arrived back to their farm, and it struck her as odd when she didn't see Ebony's shoes outside the front door. When any of the family members came home, they had left their shoes outside the door. Christine knew immediately that something was wrong. Peter called the police whilst Christine immediately ran down to the bus stop. To her horror, her daughter was not there. She raced through the creek and eventually back towards her home, knocking on the house next door, hoping that Ebony had gone to the neighbours, but Ebony was nowhere to be found. Christine knew that although Ebony was only 9 years old, she would not have gone off on her own. She would not have gone to a friend's house without telling her, because she was a very responsible child and also quite sheltered. The police soon arrived and began to put an action plan together. They knew that Ebony could not have gone far, as she had only been missing for no more than 30 minutes. They did have to act fast though, if there was any hope of finding her alive. By 5 p.m, Ebony had now been missing for 1 hour. They began to put together a timeline of Ebony's last movements. She had finished at the Bargo school at 4 p.m. and had been seen boarding her bus home. She was then spotted getting off the bus at her usual stop, on the corner of Arena and Bargo Road, where she immediately began walking in the direction of her house by herself. As more officers and searchers began to arrive at the Simpson farm, an older man approached an officer and told them that his 2 sons had seen Ebony and waved to her as she made her way home from the bus stop. He went on to say that just as she got around the corner near her house, there was a small yellow car pulled off to the side of the road. The bonnet had been up, and a man, had been working underneath the hood. Whilst police tried to track down this man, they interviewed Peter and Christine to try and get more information about Ebony. From what her family had told them, they knew that this was very out of character for the little girl. She was very reliable, with a good family background. They put together a description of what Ebony had been wearing, including the little pink backpack that she carried her lunch in. Panic heightened as the police began to realise that there were no more sightings coming in from Ebony after she had waved to the two boys. There were a couple of houses just before her home, and nobody could give any sighting of her after this. This had meant that she had more than likely never made it past the point at which the two boys had seen her. Hours passed by and Ebony was still not home. The police had now set up a grid pattern for several kilometres, covering houses, bush and dams. By 9 p.m, 5 hours after Ebony was last sighted, it began to grow dark, but word had now spread throughout the community that the Simpsons had called home for 14 years, that one of their own had gone missing. Friends, neighbours and residents all made their way down to the Simpson farm to offer support and help in the search. Police began to put the volunteers into groups and coordinate areas for them to search. Helicopters also flew above, trying to spot anything out of the ordinary. Hope was diminishing and Ebony's family was struggling to cope with the long, agonising hours. The search carried on throughout the night, but Ebony's family did not sleep. They were desperate to hear of any news. By morning, there was still nothing. Investigators once again spoke to Ebony's family and asked if they had seen anybody suspicious in the area in the run-up to her disappearance. At first, Christine was adamant that there was nobody out of the ordinary, but when the question was rephrased to her as, "Were there any suspicious cars you've seen or people that don't fit the area?" Christine did in fact recall one person. She recalled that on her way to drop Ebony off at the bus stop, she remembered seeing a man pulled off to the side of the road in a little yellow car. The car's bonnet was up and the man was underneath the hood. She said that the car was a Datsun 120Y. Alarm bells began to ring for the detectives when they realised that this was the same car that the two boys had witnessed Ebony approaching on her way home. This car had now become a major focus of the investigation. Police went back to the two boys who had last seen Ebony to ask if there was anything they could add about the car or the person with it. The two boys, aged 13 and 17 years old, shocked the police with the amount of detail that they could give. They said that the car had been a yellow Mazda. The man was leaning into the engine bay with the bonnet up, and he had something black in his hand. The car was dirty with mud splashed up the near side. It also had patchwork up it where someone had painted it an ochre yellow. By 10 a.m. on Thursday the 20th of August, Ebony had now been missing for 18 hours. People in their hundreds were gathering at the Simpson farm to be given orders from the police of where to search for Ebony. There was a sense of urgency, and more people were arriving to offer their services. Specialist police soon arrived onto the farm from Campbelltown and joined a briefing being given by a detective. During the briefing, he described Ebony and also told them to keep an eye out for a yellow Mazda 808, as it was the main focus of the investigation. As this was said, one of the officers pointed to a car and said, "Like that one over there." The sergeant turned and looked at the car parked by the command post, no more than 50 yards away. The police made their way over to the car to investigate. At the same time as this was going on, Christine was inside the farmhouse providing New South Wales Police Senior Sergeant Wayne Day with a description and a photo fit of the man who she had last seen with the yellow car near to the bus stop. As the officer began to walk out of the house with the photo fit, his boss was coming down the front gate and he showed him the image. His boss took a step back and said, "That's the man we were just talking to." One group of officers had just discovered the potential suspect's car, and another group had just potentially been speaking to its owner. Officers waited to see who came back to the car, while Sergeant Wayne Day made his way back inside to alert Christine that they believed the man was on her property. He asked Christine if she would like to come outside to take a look at the car and confirm whether this was the same one she had seen in the days running up to Ebony's disappearance. She agreed to go outside. When she saw the car, she believed that it looked similar but could not be sure. Police looked at the photo fit made by Christine and noticed that it did fit the description given by the two boys who had last seen Ebony. Soon enough, the owner of the car returned, and he did indeed match the photo fit. Police began to question him extensively. However, the man was very compliant and happy to answer any questions. Nothing shady could be found inside the boot, but police were eager to get the car in for further examination. They didn't want the man to know that he was a suspect, however, and asked if they could borrow his car to take some pictures to put in the media so that people knew what car to look out for. To their surprise, the man agreed. They took the car to the police impound, and forensics quickly got underway examining it. Meanwhile, the owner was taken to the police station to help with further inquiries. They didn't want to come down hard on the man in case Ebony was still alive and they could find out where she was. Their main priority was locating her as fast as possible. Also, they didn't know for sure whether this man was involved or whether he was just an innocent bystander. The man was soon identified as 29-year-old Andrew Garforth. He told officers that he had moved to the area a few months prior from Western Australia with his wife and 2 children. After less than 30 minutes of questioning by the police, Garforth coldly admitted that he saw the little girl. Speaking so casually, the police officers were shocked as he began to suddenly describe that as Ebony had walked past him, he picked her up and threw her inside his boot before driving her to the dam, where he tied her up, raped her, and threw her into the icy waters, weighting her body down with her own school bag. It was now 11 p.m. on Thursday the 20th of August, and Ebony had now been missing for over 31 hours. Officers rushed to the dam in the hopes that by some miracle she may have survived. They took Andrew along, where he agreed to reenact how he had murdered the little girl and pointed out where he had thrown her body. He showed no remorse and remained motionless as he showed officers how he picked the child up and threw her into the unforgiving dark waters. Law enforcement officers described the eeriness of how quiet the water was. The only thing that could be seen was the little girl's lunchbox bobbing on the top of the water. Sadly, they could not see Ebony on the banks of the dam, and it dawned on them that the little girl had not survived. It was 2 a.m, and 2 young constables came to the front door and told me that they had found her body. I just fell to the floor. I cried and begged them to let me hold her, that maybe if I held her, I could bring her back to life. When Ebony's body was eventually recovered from the dam, her wrists and ankles still had the cable that Andrew Garforth had used to bind her, tied around her. During the following 6 months, Christine Simpson could not bring herself to drive their family car as it held too many memories. She could not go shopping because of the memories of little Ebony being at her side. She lost interest in caring for herself and her family. The senseless and brazen sexual assault and murder of this defenseless little girl provoked a fierce reaction from the entire country. The public demanded that Andrew Garforth face the death penalty for his heinous crime. When Garforth's trial began in July of 1993, outraged locals gathered outside of the court to express their anger. The Simpsons were caused further pain when they were told that their daughter's murderer could face just 14 to 20 years behind bars. The family were distressed upon hearing this and felt greatly let down by the Australian justice system. During the trial, the killer's movements after he had murdered the little girl would come to light. After murdering the child, He'd been encouraged by his wife to assist in the search for Ebony. Garforth had attended the search on the Simpsons' farm and had even been captured by news cameras as he joined volunteers. Garforth, who had 76 prior convictions, showed no remorse in court. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 30 years without the possibility of parole. He unsuccessfully appealed his sentence to the High Courts in 1994. In 1995, whilst in prison, Andrew Garforth was attacked by a fellow inmate and lost his hearing in one of his ears. He was brazen enough to apply for victims' compensation, and he was initially successful in one of those claims before this decision was reviewed and overturned. The money instead was given to a charity. The Simpsons family heartache continues. In 2015, Andrew Garforth's classification was downgraded from an A-grade maximum security prisoner to a B-grade, meaning he could apply for prison jobs and even enroll in a list of courses at the jail. Amongst his new list of freedoms, Garforth would be allowed up to 4 hours of outside time a day, an increase from his previous 1-hour allowance. He would also be entitled to apply for such luxuries as a TV in his cell and a toaster. Ebony's mother Christine was furious at the decision and worried that it would set a precedent for other high-risk prisoners to be shown leniency. Fortunately, due to public outrage, the council's decision was immediately reversed. Due to the lack of counselling offered to the Simpson family, Christine decided to create her own organisation which would help other families of murdered individuals cope with their loss and grief. They did not want any other family to feel as alone and lost as they had. Ebony Simpson's parents, Christine and Peter Simpson, joined forces with Grace and Gary Lynch, the parents of New South Wales 1986 murder victim Anita Cobby, to create the Homicide Victims Support Group. The group provides support to the families of murder victims and lobbies for victims' rights.